Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Aquademia Podcast. I'm Sean O'Laughlin.
I'm Justin Grant.
And I'm Maddie Cassidy.
And today we have another visitor from Maine. Getting lots of people from Maine coming down, which is kind of nice because they're willing to drive down to us and sit and actually record with us in person, which is kind of cool. But today we had Chip Terry, who is the CEO and founder of Blue Trace, which was formerly Oyster Tracker. It's going to be something that I think is probably going to be very interesting to our listeners who are involved in shellfish farming
or just technology within the seafood industry as a whole.
Yeah, traceability is something that we bring up quite a bit, and this is a pretty interesting solution to a lot of the issues that people are facing. So make sure you enjoy this conversation with Chip, but before we get into it, we want to always remind everybody to subscribe to Aquademia wherever you listen to podcasts so you can get every new episode delivered directly to your device as soon as it's available.
Yeah, follow us on Twitter at Aquademia Pod. If you want to contact us, a few ways you can do that. You can send us an email, podcast@globalseafood.org, or you can fill out a contact us form, which is located on globalseafood.org. Go to the top of the homepage. You'll see an Aquademia podcast section.
And while you're doing all of those things, you might as well leave us a rating or review on whichever podcast platform you listen to us on if you're enjoying the show.
And before we start, I just want to say, Maddie, we're glad you're back.
I know. I feel like it's been such a long time since I've been on an episode. It's really
has.
good to be back. I've missed it.
I don't even know who you are anymore.
Maddie is like the busiest person at GSA. It's really hard to pin her down.
She's actually wearing a neck brace because she wears so many hats.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
She has to duck when she comes through the door because her hat's
And
stacked
I'm
up
pretty
to the
short,
ceiling.
so like that's saying a lot.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we're glad Maddie's back. We're glad that you are back to listen to the show, and we hope you enjoy this episode, and we will talk to you at the end.
Welcome to the Aquademia Podcast.
Our diet is hurting the environment in myriad ways. I mean, we desperately need to eat more seafood.
This is a pioneering industry with a whole lot of people who have really good ideas and a lot of experience and are unafraid.
Aquademia is your go-to podcast for a fresh take on all things seafood.
So we're sitting down with Chip Terry today, who is the CEO and co-founder of Blue Trace, which is something that I think a lot of our listeners are going to be excited to hear about, especially our shellfish farmers in the audience. We're about to make your lives a whole lot easier. So Chip came down from Maine, right?
I did.
How was the trip?
Very easy.
Yeah.
Beautiful this time of year.
Awesome. So Chip came down to talk to us about Blue Trace, which was formerly named Oyster Tracker, and it's an awesome little piece of technology that is super helpful to oyster farmers. So Chip, before we get into that, let's talk about you. The most important thing.
I'd love to talk about me.
Everyone
My
loves to
kids
talk
will
about
never listen to
themselves.
it, but I'm happy to talk about me.
So let's see. Who are you? Where'd you come from? Let's give a little quick backstory so people know who we're talking to.
Sounds good. Born and raised on the coast of Maine, down east near Bar Harbor, the place that people mostly would know. Little towns called Southwest Harbor and Castine. Grew up, next to a lot of people in the fishing industry. Sort of knew that world growing up. But I, of course, went to college in Boston and moved into the technology industry.
Where'd you go in Boston?
I went to Tufts University in Boston.
Nice.
And then I ended up going and getting a PhD in American history, thinking I was going to be a college professor.
Wow.
Little
different.
And then I took a total right turn. I ended up in the technology world. I was teaching for Princeton Review, the test prep, LSAT, GMAT, SAT prep classes. And they opened a software office in Boston. And before I'd even finished my PhD, I was the product manager for their CD-ROMs at that point. They were just transitioning to the web. And I've never looked back. I've been at a lot of different startups.
You're going to have to put like the definition of a CD-ROM probably.
I think our listeners are of a demographic that will know.
No, that's true. Yeah. And for our young listeners,
Yeah.
those will be the
I
shows.
even know what a CD-ROM is.
Oh,
so.
okay. If Maddie knows, then we're okay.
So how did you end up in seafood? How'd you get seduced? We've talked about this. There's so many people that we have on the show that they never planned to be in seafood. They just got seduced by it, and then they didn't leave.
So I'd been at a bunch of different startups in Boston. The last one had sold to Tesco, the big British retailer. So I spent about 5 or 6 years managing a team of about 50 engineers in London from here. So I would commute 1 week a month to London, and I'd spend the other 3 weeks getting up super early in the morning.
Oh, wow.
And it was really fun for about the first week. And then after that, it was a pain in the neck. But
Pretty cool the first few trips, and then it's like, I gotta do this again.
When you get to know everybody on the airline, they're like, "Oh, welcome back." You've got a problem. But anyways, my golden handcuffs ended. I quit a week later and moved the family back to Maine to sort of figure out what I was going to do when I grow up. In the meantime, I'd had a couple of friends who'd started oyster farms. One of them said, "Hey, it'd be great if you buy into our farm."
So what? Just timestamp. What year roughly are we
We're
talking
about 6 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because when you say oyster farming, especially in Maine, I'm wondering, because it's relatively a new industry. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I just wonder.
It is. And this was the fascinating thing. I sort of watched it grow up with these friends who, I'd known for years, and they'd been lobstermen, and they'd taken a retraining class at the University of Maine to learn how to be oyster farmers. It really been a side hustle for about 10 years, where they just, have a few bags in the water. They're growing a very small amount. But every year you can see it getting a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I feel like shellfish farming is one of those things that you could do as more of a side thing. Like something like salmon farming or another species, you kind of got to go all in. But shellfish farming, you can kind of start off as kind of like, this is a side thing. I got some bags out. I'll go out on the weekends and check them. And
Well, in our proximity, sorry to keep cutting you off. This is about you, not about us. But I want to get this out there because any of our subscribers or our consistent listeners will know that just because of our office location here in Portsmouth being so close to Maine, we've had other Maine guests, and a lot of the theme that we've had really is these wild fishermen who have, you use the word side hustle, but in a way it's how do you as the industry has shifted and changed a little bit and aquaculture has become very prominent in Maine, you're seeing a lot of these lobstermen also doing aquaculture, whether it's shellfish or something
they're
else.
picking it up for like supplemental income during the off season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, and what you realize following these same friends, they get bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden they're hiring 5 or 6 employees. They're shipping all over the country, even to places like the French Laundry in California. Like they've put 2 kids, my guy who's my best friend, who put 2 kids through college, doing this. And to me, as a kid who grew up in Maine, I'm used to economic depression in rural Maine. Like, this is not a place where you've seen this kind of economic development where somebody, a blue-collar guy, is starting a business. He's hiring a bunch of people, creating jobs. He's putting his kids through college. He's paying off his house. He's doing all the stuff that's amazing to see in an environment also that is great for, an industry that's great for the environment.
Yeah.
You don't usually see that happen. And so that's how I sort of got into this. I sort of got dragged into this. And, I ended up not buying into his farm, mostly because I'm too old to be lifting bags and I really have no skill in that. But I'm like, talking to him, he's like, just realizing what he's doing in terms of management of the farm, because this becomes essentially a big data problem.
Right.
And
traceability is
more and more
a constant struggle. I don't want to say struggle. It's a
priority.
It's a topic that
It's being demanded.
is
We need to figure it out.
always there's always something that needs to be figured out with traceability.
Yeah. I mean, I'd watch these guys and they literally like, I got 100 bags and I got to have them on the truck by 7 a.m. in Bangor. Fine. I've harvested them by 5 a.m., but I've got to spend now 25 minutes writing out tags by hand. Hopefully I get it right. Then I got to put them on the truck. I got to write the log. I got to send the invoice. I got to do all this paperwork. That is just, they hate it, first of all. They're not really very good at it. They've got cold hands. They don't really have a location to do it. So they're doing it in the back of their truck or wherever they are.
Yeah.
And so, I'm looking at this saying, well, this is something that's been solved. Computers can do this kind of stuff.
Right.
They can make you a whole lot more efficient. So that's how I ended
CD-ROM.
up. The CD-ROM did not come with this.
Enter Oyster Tracker.
Exactly. So I started Oyster Tracker, and I basically, as a thing for the friend here, I was like, I think we can help you manage your farm, manage the day-to-day operations of your farm. And, I said, I wonder if anybody else needs this. And I was sort of just doing it as a, not even a side hustle, just sort of a fun project to take on. Yeah. And so I, sent a note to the East Coast Shellfish Growers Association listserv. where a lot of people with AOL addresses are on that list.
I was an AOL user until like 3 years ago.
All right. We won't tell anybody that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Maddie, you're definitely editing that out.
But
I don't know if you should be proud of that or
I know.
I'm not sure.
now you can almost be proud of it. So retro. But anyways, I sent out this note saying, I'm doing this project for a friend. Is anybody else interested? I had 35 farmers call me back within a day.
Wow.
Well, it's a serious, not a problem, but it's a serious annoyance that you're addressing that you can help make things so much easier. So
Yeah, I mean that was the net of it. As you looked at it, and you're like, okay, we can, there's a big demand, and it got me exploring the whole industry because I really, I knew this little portion of Maine, and I really know a little bit off of Penobscot Bay in Maine. I don't even know all of Maine.
Yeah.
And so I had no idea about this industry and what had happened. And what I realized in exploring it is, what had happened in my little corner of Penobscot Bay was actually a much broader trend. So if you look at the farms in Maine, when I was growing up in Maine, there were maybe 3 or 4 farms. There was Mook Seafood and 1 or 2 others that were sort of figuring it out.
Yep.
But they were all small scale, barely making it. Now there's 150 farms in Maine and another 150 in permitting. And many of them are full-time, going concerns, not just side hustles. And they're doing huge scale. And then if you take a step back even further and you look at up and down every coast in the U.S., it's almost exactly the same story. So you go down to Maryland or Delaware, you see this happening. The Gulf Coast of Florida, huge operations all of a sudden going in there. Washington State.
and not just oysters, all
and
different
not-
types of species.
All different types of species. Oysters has been sort of the starter species. And then people have moved in, clams is big, mussels is big.
Yeah.
Mussels tends to be more capital intensive. So that's, tends to be a bigger operation. Clams tends to require, a good tidal zone, which not everybody has.
Right.
But oysters is pretty easy for most waterways. And they're growing the exact same product from, all the way down in Texas, all the way up to Prince Edward Island, or even Newfoundland now. So if you take a step back and you say, what's happening in the U.S.? Well, the number of farms is growing dramatically. Every state has some stat of, 200% year over year growth and all, and all sorts of things are going on. And then you look, internationally and you see the same thing happening. Last week, I was up in maritime Canada. And you see it on the northern coast of New Brunswick or up in Prince Edward Island. Huge numbers of farms going. British Columbia, huge number. And then I love to travel. One of the things that gets me excited about this is being able to go to amazing places.
Not having to just go to the same place in London.
Yeah,
Over
and
and
over
over
again.
every month.
Yeah, so like instead, I went over to Ireland. We have a couple of clients in Ireland. Ireland turns out to have huge. They don't eat oysters usually in Ireland. They eat potatoes, but they farm a lot of oysters. And then they export them to France, and they sit in the water in France for 21 days, I think, and then they become French oysters.
Wow.
There's a huge
Secrets out, guys.
Sorry, guys.
Secrets out.
but
We know what you're doing over there.
and then even down in the Mediterranean on southern France, I went to visit a farm there.
Beautiful.
And just spectacular. By the way, if you ever get a chance to go either the coast of Ireland or to southern France, go. They're both spectacular spots. But
We'd love to go.
in southern France, they have these big trellises they put out in the water, and they have these solar panels on top that run little engines. And they attach every oyster to a piece of string, basically a rope.
Yeah.
And they lift the rope in and out of the water all day long.
Wow.
Because they don't really have
cool.
good tide, so they're creating their tide.
Yeah. Wow.
That is so cool.
So it is just, like the innovation in this sector is amazing.
That's what we've been saying that for the last couple of years. It's amazing how open this industry is to new technologies and innovation, and they're just they see a problem and they just dive in headfirst and try to figure out a way to solve it, which is just really it's cool to be part of that industry.
It's so awesome, and I love that as a guy who's sort of been in the innovation world for a long time. I'm like, this is because I look at it and say, what changed? Why did oyster farming take off in the last 10 years and not 20 or 30 years ago? What's happened? And so, my thesis is there's a convergence of factors, one of which is hatcheries got a lot better. So places like the Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences, Rutgers, University of Maine, whole bunch of
And that was a big hang up for shellfish farms for a while, trying to figure
Yeah.
out how to successfully have a hatchery that will produce enough seed.
Consistency that's disease resistant, that grows well. There's triploid and diploid. I mean, go into that, but there's basically you get these hatcheries that can produce a consistent seed. So most oyster farmers now will buy from a hatchery, and they will buy it at anywhere between 2 milliliters and 6 milliliters and put it on their farm at that point. So that's the first step, is you got to get the hatcheries. Number two, you also have to have the gear. So you get better bags. You get companies like SIPA or Oyster Grow or Ketchum that are producing the right gear at the right price point. So you don't have to go invent your own gear.
Yeah.
And then wild fisheries. Up and down the coast, wild fisheries have been strained. And there's an too much overfishing as the fishing has got more efficient. You need less people fishing. And so, using Florida as an example, huge wild oyster harvest for generations, right? That was sort of known. 2 or 3 years ago, they closed the oyster farming or oyster wild harvest for the next 10 years. It's just overfished, the deep horizons, water, oil spill and whatnot.
For 10 years.
And so basically, anybody who wants to be in shellfish in Florida is probably in aquaculture.
Yeah.
You
got to adapt, right?
You got to adapt. And, it's the same with my story of my friend up in Maine who's like, lobsterman, but it's getting harder and harder to get a license and to make a living. This year it's been great, but many years it's not been great. And so, being able to move into this. And then the third is the states and governments of all sorts have realized this is a great economic development. One of the biggest challenges that not only the U.S. but globally has been a challenge is rural economic development, that we've all congregated in the cities. And even with COVID, we're all still slowly getting our way back to the cities. But you haven't had real economic development in rural waterfront communities. And this is actually a really good opportunity to do that.
And coupled with that, the environmental impact is positive.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean,
So
you look at
it's great for the economy and the environment.
Yeah. So like the whole, it's just this constellation of factors that have led to this amazing uptake that, you see globally now. Baja Peninsula of Mexico, huge number of oyster farms and gooey duck farms going in there. Gooey duck, by the way, don't get me started on gooey duck.
No, not a fan. Not a fan of gooey ducks.
Well, we have an episode which we can link where we talk about seafood. Would you try it? One of those top 10. Remember that? And wasn't gooey duck part of that?
Yes.
Or not? It was
I don't
something
know if
else.
that was part of it, was it?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Gooey ducks are huge. Yes, physically they're
'Cause
huge.
we
But
started
they're
off-
also very popular.
We started off with tame. So
Yeah.
I think we started with gooey duck and then we went to crazy.
Yeah, it got pretty nasty. Some tube worms and stuff.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Oyster Tracker
Yeah.
and
So
Food Trace. So
so we started out, helping oyster farms, and that's where we started. And one of our most successful solutions was this tagging solution for oyster farms. So for those of you guys who don't know the regulations, there's a thing called the NSSP Model Ordinance, National Shellfish Sanitation Program Model Ordinance, endorsed by the FDA. It's a public-private partnership. They produce a model ordinance, which pretty much every state adopts with some variations. Key to that is traceability of shellfish, because shellfish, and particularly oysters, tend to get people sick if they're mishandled. If they're properly handled, then people don't get sick. And I want to be clear, the vast majority of people never get sick from eating oysters, but every once in a while something bad happens.
But there's also the risk with shellfish, something like biotoxins, which is not due to mishandling. It's just something that can occur in the ocean.
Yeah.
But biotoxins you can't cook them out, right? It's not like salmonella where you cook it and you're safe. You can't do that. It's always going to be really, really toxic to humans. So if there's a biotoxin that's identified, you need to know all of the shellfish that was harvested in that area at a certain time frame, where it went, and you got to get it
Exactly.
away from people as soon as possible. So it's the traceability for shellfish, particularly is mostly with mussels, I believe, but it's a really, really big deal.
It's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And so, every shellfish operation, whether wild harvest or aquaculture, is required to basically put a tag on every bag, box, container of shellfish as it leaves the water that has the date, the time, the area of harvest, their certification number, because they have to be certified. And that makes sure that the water's open, that you don't have biotoxin, you don't have runoff, you don't have red tide, all the things that happen.
Okay.
And then as it shows up at the dealer has to record the time and the temperature, because time and temperature is actually probably the most important metric for most farms, which is there's a thing called Vibrio. And there's a couple different Vibrio bacteria out there. And it's the number one reason that people get sick. And in most cases, it'll be just sort of diarrhea for a day or two and be uncomfortable if it won't do. But for people who are immunocompromised or others, can be much more serious. But Vibrio is present in pretty much all of our waterways. It's a naturally occurring salt-tolerant bacterium. And at 90 degrees, it doubles every hour. So, in most cases, it's well below the level that would matter.
Right.
But if you have, your shellfish out of the water in the heat of the day for an hour or two, it can get
or
bad
if the
pretty
transport
quickly.
water, if you have it in transport, that's not.
Yeah, exactly. So you have, examples, the classic example was, I think it was 10 or 12 years ago, there was a truck driving from somewhere in the South, I think New Orleans, up to Tennessee. And, the truck driver does what some people will do occasionally, which is stop at a bar, turn off the truck and go inside and spend the night. Nice hot summer. Then turn the truck back on, cool it back down and drop them off. And a whole bunch of people got sick of that. Yeah. And tracing that back was a challenge.
Right.
So what the regulations require is you attach this tag as you harvest, put it in a log, file that with the state. As it shows up at the dealer, usually like an hour later, that dealer takes that tag off, puts their own tag back on, again, does a receiving log and a shipping log. And, an average shellfish will often go through 2 to 5 or 6 steps between the time it leaves the farm and the time it ends up on your table, because it's just, there are people that do the sort of collection of shellfish,
chains,
and then the steps to get it to, say, from, the coast of Maine to Boston to Atlanta to a restaurant in Atlanta.
Right.
There's a huge, long chain that, it's this cold chain that has to happen. And so that's, where we ended up is, helping that cold chain. And so what we do, a lot of what we do is, starting with that harvest. So the harvester writes out the tag. Instead of that, if you've gotten a parking ticket recently and you've watched them print out the ticket off their hip, we effectively do the same thing.
Yeah.
Print out your shellfish tag from your phone. We create the log automatically. It's all stored in the cloud so that you don't lose it if your phone goes overboard. You don't have to worry about your handwriting. And,
Probably happens a lot.
in mid-February, trying to write a tag out when it's
When your hands are numb.
your hands are numb and they're wet. So all that makes it really easy for that harvester to sort of comply with the regulations, to print out their tags, all that kind of stuff. But you've also put a QR code at the bottom of that tag.
Is that for receiving?
And so the receiving company can then just scan it in, take all that data. They don't have to look at the handwriting and try to decipher what this guy wrote. Yeah. And they can then put their own tag on. Yep. And it can go all the way down the chain that way. That's awesome. Here's one of the amazing things about cloud computing or cloud storage is essentially it's unlimited. So, there's a key data points that you need for what they call key data elements, KDEs, which you need for all these critical tracking events. Mm-hmm. But they're pretty, from a data perspective, they're very small. So we can basically add anything else we want. So and
be able to access all that history.
Exactly. So we call it Compliance Plus, which is we're going to help you comply, but we're also going to give you a marketing channel, because that tag ends up at that shucker who wants to know a little bit about, why is Norumbega different than Bagaduce oysters? And they can scan the tag, they can meet the farmer, they can learn about how they grow this product, they can have pictures of the location.
That's amazing.
Tasting notes.
That's not dissimilar from like the Ideal Fish tag. We spoke with people who at an indoor recirculating farm in Connecticut. It's actually our most popular episode is when we spoke with them.
I've listened to that episode.
Yeah. And they so then they've talked about their gill tags where they have QR codes and you can kind of see the history of the fish. Only this is a little bit more, this being able to like see the farmer and like see pictures and stuff from where it comes from is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat. There's some fantastic videos on Blue Trace website, blue-trace.com.
Thank you.
And it's not bluetrace.com, blue-trace.
We'll put a link, so
they'll be in our show notes. But there's some really good videos in some of the different sections of that, particularly the testimonial section. You can really see how it's been impacting these farmers, and they're just so stoked to not have to write out these labels. And it really is. It's cool. Like it prints on waterproof paper, so they can literally have this little printer like on their boat and just print it out in real time. It's pretty cool. I don't know if
this is a really bad idea on podcast, but here's show and tell. I brought a printer with me. And it's
all of our listeners, take a look at this.
But it literally fits in the palm of your hand. It works just like a POS terminal printer. It just prints out tags. And it works on Bluetooth.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And that's that's what.
What's the battery life for that thing?
About 2 days.
Wow,
that's awesome.
And supposedly you can drop it from 8 feet and it won't get damaged.
I'm telling you,
I haven't tried that, but
shellfish farmers, look into this. This is huge.
Yeah.
This is really I mean, this is something. It's impressive.
It's, and, you want some of the challenges. Supply chain, you mentioned that. The supply chain for printers and papers is totally bottled up.
Oh, yeah.
So we started with these little TSC printers.
Yeah.
And then, about 6 months in, somebody said, oh, you can't get any more TSC printers for the next 8 months.
Oh my gosh.
So we had to go scramble. We tried a whole bunch of different brands. We went back to Zebra. We became a reseller of Zebra, so we have an alternative.
So this
on
is
Zebra.
not something that you needed to like develop and like kind of
No, we're
invent.
we're
It
using
exists, and you have the software that.
we have the
Gotcha.
software to
Yeah.
power it.
Gotcha.
We don't need to be a
Genius.
printer company.
No, well, that's what I was going to ask. Actually, is like, is this something that you needed to kind of like invent and develop and design and
Yeah,
have
so-
all like prototypes and all this stuff? But the technology exists. You just had to create the
We had to
the proper
package it together.
Yeah.
And that's been the challenge, is trying to figure out. I've learned a heck of a lot more about paper than I ever thought I would. Turns out there's a lot of different papers.
Yeah.
And we're just moving into adhesive, so you can stick things on the side of a box. Turns out there's about 40 different types of adhesive that are used on stickers, depending on whether you're wet, wax, freezing, salt water, fresh water. They're just learning all of these things.
That like makes so much sense though.
Different kinds of adhesive. We're not even talking about the paper.
No, just the adhesive on the back of the dang paper.
Wow.
So we've been literally I was up in Ellsworth, Maine, and there's a big mussel farmer up there, and they do these big wet boxes that are 900 pounds, and they're shipping it down to Philadelphia. And so I'm literally like, they're sticking different pieces of adhesive on there with my phone number on it and say, can you call me when this arrives, if it arrives?
Wow.
Just to see if it'll fall off in transportation.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Because if it falls off in transportation, that's a big problem.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's how you figure, you do all your research, but then you got to do the field studies, right? To make sure that it actually works.
Yeah.
Exactly.
These are the things you don't think of.
Yeah, it's it's those little things that make all the difference.
Yeah.
So started out with just oysters.
Yep. And
Oyster
then
Tracker, it was called.
Yep. And we rapidly realized that we were broader than oysters.
Yeah.
These traceability rules apply to all shellfish. So it made sense for mussels, for clams, for gooey duck, for whatever. And so we've renamed ourselves to Blue Trace for that reason. And we've rapidly expanded into other parts.
Is anyone else doing this?
There's people are doing various parts of it.
Yeah.
There's big ERP companies like Microsoft and IBM, et cetera, that do sort of food traceability solutions.
Yeah.
They're designed for the Ciscos of the world.
Right.
Yeah, they're
Right.
designed for companies that can afford to spend $2 million on a computer system and
you're here
hire
for the
3 people.
farmers.
And none of our farmers are going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the area you go. I mean, I was just at a major distributor the other day. They literally said they spent $2 million on a computer system. They turned it on, and 3 days later, it was working so poorly they turned it off, and that was 6 months ago.
Oh my god.
And
Jeez.
that happens. I've heard variations of that story all the time.
Wow.
Because you're in the seafood industry, you're not in the technology industry. It's not even technology adjacent industry. This is not like something where you're used to spending a lot of time on computers and you can figure these things out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are
They want to focus on growing shellfish.
They want to grow shellfish. If you've got seafood moving through your plant, you don't want to sit in there.
Right.
We need it in and out in the same day.
Yep.
You do not
Right.
want something that's going to sit there on your floor while you figure out the computer system and figure out how to print out labels and all the other stuff.
And especially with shellfish, it's so specific and the things that you're tracking are so unique to shellfish that it would be difficult to take like a box brand and apply that to the tech that you're trying to use.
Exactly. So, if you were super tech savvy and you could, had time to figure this all out, you probably could figure it out.
Right.
But most companies aren't that, and your time's better spent elsewhere.
Yeah. Yep.
But, what's also been interesting is what's happening in the regulations. So the regulations are pretty strong today in shellfish, but they're actually becoming stronger and they're getting broader. So most notably, the Food Safety Modernization Act. I don't know if you guys have followed this.
Yep.
So the Food Safety Modernization Act was passed 10, 12 years ago, and it's all around food safety. It basically gives the FDA regulatory oversight of the food safety and supply chains. They passed a new update of that, the new era in food safety, a couple of years ago, and they've just been publishing the rules. And what that's basically mandating is a few things, but key to it is digital traceability. So when the inspector shows up, you have to be able to give them a spreadsheet of your traceability information within 24 hours, which my guess right now is somewhere around 70 to 80% of harvesters and distributors would have trouble complying with.
That's hard to do. That's hard to do.
Yeah. So if that happened today, people would be typing into a spreadsheet for hours on end, hoping to get under that 24-hour window.
We only have 24 hours. We have a lot to do.
And so that's a key part of it. The other key part of it is they're taking what are essentially the regulations for shellfish and expanding to pretty much all of seafood, except for scallops and catfish for some reason. But
Throw a dart.
And to their credit, what they did is they went and looked at food safety statistics over the last 20 years and said what products have gotten people sick, and it's what you'd expect. It's lettuce, it's eggs, it's butter.
Lettuce. Yeah, romaine lettuce had a
romaine lettuce and
hell of a time a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and so they basically said okay, these are the critical foods that we need to have better traceability and better visibility onto, and so that rule is not in effect yet, but it's coming.
And people are freaking out.
And people are just starting to freak out. Most people haven't paid any attention. They're like, that's some FDA rule. I'll deal with it when it comes out.
Yeah. I'll deal with it when I get my first knock on the door. Yeah, exactly.
So, and they'll be reasonable in terms of time and implementation and all this kind of stuff. I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that by tomorrow you better have digital traceability. But
so did the Food Safety Modernization Act prompt any changes or updates to what you guys are doing, or is it just kind of like, hey, we're ready for this?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of put us in the right spot at the right time.
Yeah.
So what we've been doing is accelerating our development. So we've hired more people and whatnot. We also were very fortunate to get a grant from NOAA. The National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration.
That's great.
They do what's called an SBIR grant. And so for our tied-to-table traceability and marketing system, we got a grant. We got one last year, what's called a phase 1, which about 10 to 15% of people who apply get it. And then phase 2, which is of those people who've gotten phase 1, about 30% get phase 2. And we just got phase 2.
Nice.
Congratulations.
So
feeling good.
That has a lot to do with my team and not me.
Well, who's here to represent the team?
We've hired more developers. We just hired our first West Coast rep. We've got a guy down in Virginia. We've got we've really expanded from this small little thing in Maine.
That's awesome.
To being a global operation now.
Pretty wild. It's pretty crazy when you're in a tiny little New England town and the impact that you can have around the world. We see the same thing here at GSA. It's kind of weird when you think about it.
Yeah.
With us too. Like we have people listening in countries everywhere except Antarctica. Yeah. All over the world.
We still hope that in one of those countries there's a billboard with our faces on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Someday we'll get off a plane in some random country and we'll just be celebrities without even knowing it.
Yeah. There you go. We'll get.
Yeah, we're G-list celebrities, right?
Yeah.
One of our digress for a minute. One of our board members is a woman named Abigail Carroll, who founded None Such Oysters in Scarborough, Maine. Super smart. Went to Columbia. Founded. You guys may know the story. She invested in us and is also a board member. But she's also gotten a lot of press in Maine as sort of this woman oyster farmer and whatnot. And she said they somehow decided to put a picture of her on a billboard at the Bangor airport.
Oh my God.
And she had a friend who was going through the Bangor airport like, do you know that you're more than life size as you get off the plane?
That's so funny.
She's like, do I have to drive to Bangor now to go?
Oh my goodness. No discounts on flights or anything?
No, and I think it was even after you went through the security check. So she had to get a ticket to get in there to go see her picture.
Man. That's kind of funny. Oh, geez. So I'm curious, since you switched over from Oyster Tracker to Blue Trace, what is kind of the ratio for other species? What are some of the most popular species? Obviously, I'm sure the majority of your clients are oyster farmers still, but when we're looking at other species such as mussels or clams or gooey ducks or whatever, what are we looking at for those ratios and locations?
Yeah, so probably 80% is still oysters. Although a lot of our oyster farmers, experiment with other species. So I was just down in Hampton, New Hampshire here today with one of our farms. And, they're 90% oysters, 95% oysters, but they have a little clam operation. They're trying that out. They're trying some scallops. So, they're going to use this for those things as well. And that's not an uncommon scenario.
I wonder if the equipment that you use can be multi-purposed, or if, I mean, I should know this. I mean, we've seen farmed, I mean, especially in Maine, you know, in Ireland, we did a film, GAA film in Ireland, which I think we can send, I'm hoping that we can link to it in the show notes, but they were mussels.
Mhm.
And,
On the southern coast of Ireland.
Yeah,
And so I
I think you did Hardy Oysters. I think you did Joe
Yes.
Hardy,
Sounds right.
Yep.
Yep.
who is an amazing guy. You should definitely go visit this.
Is he a client?
He right now not, because they've had some other issues, but he has been in the past. And just, I went over there, actually stayed with him. There's nothing like a business meeting at 4 a.m. on a muddy, wet.
Yeah, right.
And it's probably dark
Wake
out.
up.
Time to
Wake
get
up
up
in the morning.
But yeah, they do amazing stuff.
So I guess I wonder if it's easy to repurpose your equipment to grow different species. So if you could use the same equipment for mussels that you could for clams, or vice
Depends on
versa.
the life cycle of the
Yeah,
species and everything.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Like mussels are, they're attaching onto rope lines, and
Yeah.
they're gonna settle much differently than clams, which dig in the sand. So
And oysters, I know this isn't the topic of this episode, but what's the grow out cycle for an oyster? How long is it ready to harvest?
So so to answer your first question, you can occasionally do different species, but most of the time you have to have unique equipment for that species.
Yep.
And then the grow out cycle of oysters, there are two types of oysters grown primarily in the U.S. On the East Coast, it's Virginica. On the West Coast, it's Pacific or Gygas. The grow out cycle tends to be very similar in both.
Mm-hmm.
What happens with oysters is above 50 degrees and there's food in the water, they grow pretty fast. As soon as it gets below about 50 degrees, they essentially go into hibernation. So what that means is if you're in the Gulf Coast of Florida, you can grow a oyster from 6 millimeters to 3 inches in about 10 months. If you're in Prince Edward Island, Canada, it may take you 5 years.
Yeah.
Right.
That's interesting. No, that's,
And there's a lot of breeding programs going on now to figure out how to make that shorter and better, and how to have a better cup, and all sorts of different things going on with breeding. Same way chickens got a whole lot better than they used to be. Look for shellfish, particularly oysters, but other species as well, to get a whole lot better over the next 10 years.
oh, that is interesting. I wonder what and again, I'm going off track here, but the market price for something, depending on where it's geographically located, if that plays a role, and, if you are in waters that are colder and your grow out is twice as long as somewhere where it's warmer, if that changes the price per oyster or not.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly changes your cost. So every region has its benefits and its drawbacks.
Yeah.
The northern oysters from Maine, New Hampshire, and further north tend to get a better price. They just have a slightly better brand. Most would argue, including myself being from Maine, that they maybe taste better. But I'm not going to say that too loudly, because there are amazing oysters all over the place. But
right, and it's a marketing machine, right? Something about New England seafood.
Yeah, it just
it works very well.
Yeah.
It's very marketable.
And so, if you look at sort of the wholesale, the farm gate price for an oyster in New England, they might get 50 cents to 65 cents on average. If they're selling to a distributor, they'll get more if they're going directly to a restaurant. If you go down to the Chesapeake, which tends to be much faster growing, Virginia and Maryland are probably the biggest operations on the East Coast. They are, they'll get much lower, be 40 cents to 60 cents, sometimes even lower than that. Yeah. And then Florida, bizarrely enough, is actually on the Gulf Coast done quite well in terms of their pricing. And part of that is just their population centers are there, and they figured out how to grow a really good oyster down there. Yeah. Their challenge is hurricanes. So every few years, you get everything wiped out.
Yeah.
And so that's, you can grow them in a year, but every 5 years you lose everything. Yeah. And so those are your challenges.
Pros and cons of the locations, like you said.
Yeah, for sure. That's fascinating. So what is kind of on the horizons for Blue Trace? What are we looking at in the future? Are you looking to expand into other like finfish or crustaceans, or are you looking to just kind of grow outwardly for a more global clientele? Like what do you think is in the future for it?
Great things. Let's start there. So number one will be doubling down on what we're currently doing. There are a lot of pieces of paperwork that everybody has to do up and down the chain. whether it's bills of lading, whether it's invoicing, transaction slips. There's a whole bunch of pieces of paperwork that are beyond the tag that are stuff that we need to do. And part of that will be things like integrating with QuickBooks and other stuff. Then species expansion, we're already starting to see that. Our system is built flexibly enough that you can basically put any species in it you want. So we have distributors in Maine who are using it for lobster. We have distributors on the Boston Fish Bureau who are using us for fish. So
Wild caught. So so it's versatile. It's
versatile.
Not just for farmers.
So we basically built a versatile system.
It's awesome.
So those are probably our biggest expansion points right now, which is sticking mostly the North American market because we know the regulations here. We know what has to happen here.
Yeah, that's difficult with expansion. All of the regulations are so location based.
Just in the U.S., let alone in different countries.
State-wise even in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, it's, in Washington State, if you harvest an oyster, you have to write down the water temperature and the temperature of the animal at harvest.
Wow.
That's the only state where you have to do that.
Wow.
But in Virginia, you have to write down the time you harvested it and the time you landed it.
Oh my gosh.
And in Florida, you got to make sure that you've harvested it by 9 a.m. because after 9 a.m. it's too hot.
Wow.
So every state has its own slight variations on these regulations.
It's crazy.
But probably the meat of, no pun intended, is similar enough where your developers can really don't have to do too much major tweaking to build something that is almost universal for at least everything in North America.
That's key, is making it universal. And, one of the other things is we've started with the phone as the primary interface. Most computer programmers start, or at least historically, have started with the computer, right? Desktop computer, big screen. I'm used to doing
CD-ROMs.
Yeah, CD-ROMs. Cathode ray tubes, whatever it is. Every one of our farmers, every grumpy farmer has a supercomputer in their pocket. And they're on it all day long. They're texting with their buyers, they're texting with their employees, and so we're just fitting naturally into that workflow.
Streaming Netflix out on the boat.
Exactly. I'm waiting for this dang tumbling to get done. I better go watch Squid Game.
I just finished Squid Game. That was really good.
I did too. I watched 2 episodes last night while rocking a baby in the middle of the night.
You're going to love it, Sean.
I think I just finished episode 5. So I'm getting there. Getting there.
It is sort of a devastating show.
Yeah.
It's crazy. The end is...
There's a lot of emotions. No spoilers, though.
Yeah.
No.
I haven't finished it.
Anyway, streaming Squid Game out on the boat.
Yeah, streaming Squid Game out on the boat. And just, when you're a software developer, what you need to do is you need to go spend a lot of time with your target user and really understand what the heck they're going through. Because, I can sit up in my tower and, write a whole dissertation on why I think the seafood industry should be different and what it should do. But you go out and you walk around in the mud with these guys, literally, or you sit on a loading dock and you watch what actually happens. 3 weeks ago, I was down in New York. We have a client who buys a lot of stuff from Fulton Street Fish Market, which would be an amazing episode for you guys if you've ever been there. It's the second largest seafood market in the world behind Tokyo. It is literally city blocks up in the Bronx.
Jeez.
And it opens at, I think, 3 a.m. and it closes at like 7:30 a.m. And during that time, millions of dollars of seafood is changing hands.
We're going to send Justin to go do that one.
I would go.
I'll be sleeping. No, actually, I would totally.
It is the most fascinating thing. And you walk in there and they're like, stall after stall of seafood from all over the world.
That's cool.
And then there are all these folks from restaurants, from distributors there to buy that seafood. And they walk up and down, and it is, like an old style pit trading platform for stocks. It is that, what do you got here? What do you have over here? And these guys have been doing it for generations. I mean, the guy we were with, he said his father used to go to the Fulton Street Fish Market when he was a kid. So he would go with his father when he was 6 years old. And now he's, probably 40, and still going every morning to the Fulton Street Fish Market. Wow.
That's crazy.
And it is this incredible world to watch what's going on.
And you wouldn't know unless you go there.
Yeah.
You can't describe it. I can only imagine what that's like.
Oh yeah, my head is, this whole time I've envisioned a lot of what I think it looks like, but until you're probably really there and see the sights and the smells.
Exactly. And everything, and it's just amazing to watch. And it's a whole community that basically their day is done at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
And then they're off to whatever else they're doing.
Wow.
But you realize like how hard it is to get whatever seafood it is from that fishing boat to your table.
Mhm.
And there's the occasional one that can do farm to table or boat to table and do a really great job at that. But the vast majority of our seafood goes through these very complicated supply chains, and figuring out, you guys are central to that. It's sort of making sure that a lot of that is safe, that it's doing all the right things. But you just watch what actually happens in real life, and you realize, how hard these guys work, and honestly, how undigital this world is. And this is why things like
that's a hard
this.
thing in this industry is it like we were saying, they're very open to innovative technology, but there's this old school mentality of like, this is how it's always worked. This is what we're going to keep doing. And those two sides kind of butt heads sometimes.
Yeah. And many of these are family owned businesses that have been 2, 3, 4 generations that have worked well for granddad. It's going to work well for me. I don't need to think about
if
something
it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. And quite honestly, they're not wrong.
Right.
If you can get away without changing something. I mean, I was at a huge distributor in Philadelphia, again, 4 a.m., watching, 18 tractor trailer loads of seafood show up one morning. And there's...
It wasn't Samuel Seafood, was it?
It was.
Yeah. We've traveled there. We had a day where we traveled there in the morning, recorded an episode, and came back.
Yeah.
Same day.
And it's, it's amazing. You watch that, the number of forklifts flying around this floor.
It's an impressive facility.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And, but you watch how all those boxes are labeled. I don't know if you watch this. I'm all about labeling these days. Which is
not really super high priority for us checking out the labeling, but definitely part of what they do.
And so I saw this huge pallet of squid come in, and the only label on these brown cardboard boxes is SQL, SQM, medium squid or large squid.
Oh wow!
And you're supposed to know that each of these boxes weighs 60 pounds.
Yeah. Oh.
And you're supposed to know who it came from. And these guys all do, and they do an amazing job at it.
Yeah.
But
it's kind of like a game that they have to play. Like a squid game.
It is a little bit of a squid game. And and part of it's back to this silly adhesive thing is like, they have trouble getting adhesive that sticks to these boxes. So they literally write it in crayon on the side of the box.
Yeah, we did notice that there was, everything was like handwritten in like marker on the side of I remember that. And it just looked like convenience because it was like everything looked like dry erase marker, just so you can change things up if you had to. But I guess I didn't even think about that everything's wet, so you can't get stuff to stick to it.
And it might get frozen along the way, and unthawed out, and then things fly off.
Interesting.
But you watch these systems and you see what, the amazing thing that, something comes from that farm on the Damascata to that, restaurant in Atlanta. And, 99.999% of the time, everything works.
Yeah.
And it's probably gone through 5 different companies and 30 different people, and just to get there so you can have an oyster on your plate.
Yeah, worth it.
But if we get back to what you were talking about, really, it's not just sitting up in a room and trying to come up with this innovative technology that's going to change the way maybe there's like an outcome, right? But you saw firsthand, like, what is it that these fishermen are already using, and how can you just enhance that without saying, hey, I want you to totally change what you're doing so that you can have this extra feature. It's continue doing the great work you're doing, and we're going to give you something that's going to make it even easier, and it's not going to change that much of your daily work.
Exactly.
Yeah, instead of taking all this time to write out these labels, punch in your information in this, print it out, it'll save you hours of work, it'll make things easier, it'll make things less stressful for you, and that's all that people want, really. They want things to be easier.
I mean, you talk about it as, one of the ways you talk about it in software is what's the job they're trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
And then you figure out what the tool that makes that for that job.
Work yourself backwards.
Work from there, because I hear it all the time. I talk to, I get investors that call up and whatnot, and they'll say, what's your IoT strategy? Or how are you using blockchain? Or all the, AI, where does AI fit in this? I'm like, we're just going to start with making their lives better.
Yeah.
And we can add those pieces on if they make sense over time.
Start with the client. Start with the people that are going to pay you.
Yeah. Start with the client
and
and
say,
we could, you could imagine a, remote, thermostat or, temperature gauge that has dissolved oxygen and humidity and all the other pieces that you'd want that connects to your phone and it automatically updates all the time. and we'll probably do that at some point.
Yeah.
But that's not what people are asking for right now.
Yep.
No.
Um,
That's the next thing. Eliminating the clipboard is the next step.
Yeah, exactly. If you can get them out of the handwriting thing, because the problem they face is like we had a guy down in the Cape who said, I hired this guy to write tags, and he writes tags, and he forgets to put the harvest location on the tag. Truck gets stopped, $5,000 product has to be thrown out, and because one guy forgot to put the harvest location on a tag, and a guy was making probably minimum wage.
Trying to get through it as fast as he could.
Yeah, trying to get, no, truck leaves in 15 minutes. You got to write out the 100 tags.
Yeah.
I'm sure he went flying through.
And there's where technology that has those. You cannot print a tag unless you've filled out X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost.
Right. Required fields.
Yeah. So
Those have
That's
saved
awesome.
me a lot. It's like, you don't submit. You forgot your CVV code for your credit card. I'm like, oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah, or the the classic, you said attachment in this email, but there's no attachment.
That's one of the best inventions ever because I chronically forget to attach things.
I know. Yeah, and meeting locations on calendars. So if people want to get in contact with you, work with Blue Trace, what is the best way for them to do that?
Go to our website, blue-trace.com. Oyster Talk will still work as well, but blue-trace.com. We can put my phone number in the show notes.
Yeah, any information that you want in the show notes?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You can email me directly at chip@blue-trace.com, CHIP. I'd love to talk to people. That's what I do. I drive around and I talk to people.
Awesome. Well, that's what you're doing today. You're talking to us.
And it was great. I was able to align this, a meeting with a regulator in New Hampshire and another farm. in
Now
New
you
Hampshire.
can go into downtown Portsmouth and get some amazing oysters
Yeah, exactly.
before you head back up to Maine.
I showed up. I went to Canada last week. I came back. Hero in my house right now because I was able to show up with 100 New Brunswick oysters.
There you go.
And they were really
Well,
good.
I'll say this. Chip did not show up to GSA with any oysters today.
I totally
But
failed.
That's okay.
It wasn't in the required notes.
That's okay. We didn't talk about that ahead of time. It's all right.
Next time.
Yes, next time.
What are you doing next week?
Exactly.
So Chip is going to be on the next episode as well.
The next 10.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to get out there, kind of while you have the platform, while you have the mic?
No, I mean, the one thing that people usually the first question everybody asks is what's the price point? And, for a small farmer who's just starting, it's $500. And that's the printer, that's the paper, that's the software. And one of the key things we do is we don't do a monthly fee, at least for our farmers. What we do is it's a per tag price, and we bake it into the replenishment of paper. So you're going to pay about the same as you're paying for your paper today, but you get the software and a lot easier.
Wow.
So that's, we price this. Companies have different strategies. You can price it for the big guys, and you can sell 10 clients a year at $1 million.
Yep.
Or you can price it for the small guys with the idea that you're going to get a lot more clients. We price it for the small guys. And so that's one of the things that I think everybody should know is that's sort of where we've headed, and that's the sweet spot we look at.
Awesome.
That's great.
Because this industry, the vast majority of this industry is small guys and gals.
You can make a bigger difference.
Especially in rural areas like Maine.
Yeah,
So-
and that's, it's our roots, where you're coming from. And we've got, the farmers that we meet are amazing. So if you get down to, Long Island, there's some amazing farmers down there. There's this woman, Sue Wicks. She was a WNBA player. She's much taller than I am. And she farms at Violet Cove Oysters. She started an oyster farm after her career. And she does an amazing oyster down there.
Wow.
That'd be a great guest. We'll have to see if we can connect with her.
Yeah,
Justin, Maddie, you guys have anything else?
Thank you for driving all the way here.
no problem.
Spending
This
some
is
time
great.
with us.
No, we appreciate you having, again, Chip Terry from blue-trace.com. Make sure we get it right.
Just search Blue Trace in Google. We'll show up.
Yeah. And just go to the show notes. Click the link in the show notes and make sure you check it out. I really want to urge any of our Shellfish Farmer listeners to just check it out because I think it is something that could be really helpful. I think it's pretty cool. And thank you for coming down and joining us, talking with us today. We really appreciate it.
I thank you guys. And your podcast is awesome. I do listen to pretty much everyone.
Well, thank you for being a
Oh,
listener.
that's awesome.
We really
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks.
We love it. Folks, that was our conversation with Chip Terry from Blue Trace. As always, we hope you enjoyed the episode. We hope you learned something. And I want to remind everybody to make sure that if you're not yet, that you are subscribed to Aquademia wherever you listen to podcasts so you can get those brand new episodes directly downloaded onto your device as soon as they're available.
Check us out on Twitter and give us a follow. You can find us at Aquademia Pod. Want to contact us? A few ways you can do that. Send us an email, podcast@globalseafood.org, or visit globalseafood.org. Go to the top of the homepage. You'll see Aquademia. Click on that, and there'll be a contact us form.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to leave us a rating and review on whichever platform you listen to us on.
And now's a good time to do it because Maddie's back and you're not angry anymore.
Yeah, I'm nice.
No, not you. I mean the listeners. We're probably they were probably angry that you weren't here as well.
Oh, okay.
You're always nice.
So now's a good time to leave a rating and review because she's back and you don't need
Better
to worry
than
about
ever.
that anymore. That's right. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time.
Ciao.
Bye.